There is a feeling. It doesn't roar. It doesn't demand. It whispers. It begins as a question, a flicker, a "what's that?" or "how does this work?" or "what if?" And in that whisper, the brain leans forward. Something ancient stirs. It's not obligation. It's not achievement. It's not survival. It's curiosity. And in the most unexpected of ways, this soft mental motion does what few other forces can. It activates the brain's reward system. That's right, curiosity, real, genuine, self-initiated exploration triggers the same internal circuitry as food, sex, and social connection. Not metaphorically, biologically. You get a dopamine pulse, not when you finish learning, but when you start wanting to know. That moment of wonder, that mental itch, it is not a distraction. It is a reward pathway ignition. And this is the core of the practice we call Curiosity Hour, a space you carve each day to follow your wonder, to learn what you actually want to learn, to engage in mental play without expectation, performance, or productivity metrics. It can last 30 minutes or 60. It doesn't matter. To what matters is the mode. You follow interest, not obligation. And in doing so, you turn your brain from a tool of execution into a field of activation. Let's look at why this works. The neurochemistry of curiosity. When you're curious, the brain lights up, literally. Research from UC Davis, Gruber et al., 2014 shows that when people engage with information they're curious about, the ventral tegmental area, VTA, a dopamine-rich part of the brain, activates the nucleus accumbens lights up, the same region involved in anticipating rewards. The hippocampus, critical for memory formation, shows increased activity. The default mode network, responsible for daydreaming and integration, synchronizes with the executive network, which governs planning and attention. In short, curiosity binds emotion, memory, and motivation. It makes learning feel good, and it makes remembered information stick longer. This means that reading or exploring, out of pure interest, isn't a break from important work. It is the work, because the more you stimulate curiosity, the more flexible, adaptive, and focused your brain becomes. Why curiosity is medicine for modern minds. We live in a time of saturation, information overload, attention scarcity. Our minds are pulled toward urgency, not wonder, toward dopamine from scrolling, not discovering, toward the passive consumption of stimulation, not the active pursuit of meaning. Curiosity cuts through that. Because it is voluntary, driven from within, playful, detached from pressure, engaged, it builds flow. Expansive, it creates connections across domains. Restorative, it brings joy without dependency. In a brain overrun by cortisol, curiosity is a neurochemical breath of air. It reduces stress hormones, increases prefrontal cortex activation, and builds neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to rewire and grow. And unlike passive entertainment, curiosity makes you an active participant in your cognitive evolution. How to build a curiosity hour. You don't need a curriculum. You need permission. Permission to wonder, to follow tangents, to learn what lights you up, not what's expected. That's why Curiosity Hour begins with a simple ritual. Step 1. Enter the mind of a child. Remember what fascinated you before it was monetized or graded. Dinosaurs, space, psychology, magic, fractals, mythology. Step 2. Ask one genuine question. How do whales sleep? What's the science behind déjà vu? What was the real Stoic view on emotion? How did the Silk Road affect language? What happens in the brain during déjà vu? Step 3. Begin with a 20-60 minutes block. Read, watch, listen, Take notes if it helps, but don't pressure retention. Trust the dopamine. Step 4. Let tangents be teachers. Don't fear off-topic branches. They are the roots of depth. A question about stars may lead to quantum physics. A documentary on bees might take you to swarm intelligence in AI. Step 5. End with reflection. What did I just learn? How did it make me feel? What new question did it give me? This closing seals the memory loop and reinforces emotional connection to learning. The identity shift. Something strange happens when you begin practicing Curiosity Hour regularly. You stop seeing yourself as someone who has to learn. You become someone who lives to explore. This shift affects your confidence because you feel resourceful, your emotional tone because curiosity displaces worry, your social depth because you bring more nuance to conversation, your focus capacity because attention improves when it's intrinsically motivated. This is not theoretical. It is identity through behavior. When you follow curiosity consistently, you start to believe, I'm someone who always figures things out. I'm someone whose brain loves to learn. I'm someone who gets excited by the unknown. And that belief is fuel, not hype, not pressure, but sustainable intellectual joy. What to explore during Curiosity Hour? Anything that brings you genuine interest, no matter how niche. Here are examples that have helped thousands reclaim their mental energy. The physics of time dilation. How languages evolve without central control. Emotional mapping in film scores. Why jellyfish don't die. History of ancient cities. Architecture of ant colonies. Why bread rises. How scent links to memory. The life of Nikola Tesla. Chaos theory in weather systems. The psychology of dreams, neuroplasticity and learning. The mathematics of music. AI versus human creativity. Philosophy of free will. Your curiosity is not random. It is coded guidance to your deepest self. Every time you follow it, you strengthen that signal. Why the brain loves curiosity evolutionarily. Curiosity kept us alive. It told us, explore that new cave. Taste that berry, but carefully. Notice that pattern in the sky. Why did that animal behave differently? It was our cognitive radar. And today, though the jungle has become digital, the radar still works. It's not just a luxury. It's a core survival mechanism. The more you train it, the faster you learn, the deeper you remember, the stronger your cognition becomes under pressure. In fact, many studies show that curiosity increases memory retention, even for unrelated material, learned at the same time. That means when you learn something you want, you remember everything better. Curiosity rewires the entire learning system. Curiosity as a healing practice. Let's go deeper. Curiosity isn't just fun. It is antidote to anxiety. Because fear is fixated on the known danger, curiosity is open to new information. You can't be fully curious and fully afraid at the same time. The limbic system, emotion, and prefrontal cortex, cognition, begin to resynchronize during active curiosity. It softens rumination. It expands perspective. It reduces threat bias. In trauma therapy, clinicians often help clients rebuild curiosity as a sign that the nervous system is ready to engage with life again. That's how profound curiosity is. It isn't entertainment. It's reconnection. Final thought: the world doesn't need more discipline. It needs more wonder. And you don't need to be an expert. You need to be alive to questions. Let 1 hour a day, or even 30 minutes, be for that. Let yourself roam. Let your neurons light up like constellations. And remember, the brain was not built to execute commands. It was built to seek, sense, ask, imagine, play. That is your original self, and it's one page, one video, one question away. Curiosity is not a break from progress. It is the pulse of possibility. and it's yours, every day, every hour, if you simply follow it. There's something ancient within you, an invisible clock ticking silently beneath your awareness. It doesn't chime, it doesn't beep, it pulses every 90 minutes, calling you into rhythm with yourself. Most ignore it, most override it with caffeine, artificial light, deadlines, and the endless buzz of devices. But if you listen, truly listen, you'll find a rhythm more powerful than motivation, more consistent than willpower. It's called your ultradian cycle. The human body, for all its complexity, thrives on cycles, just as we sleep in repeating stages, REM deep, light. Our waking hours are patterned too. We cycle through phases of high focus and low energy every 90 minutes. Discovered by sleep researcher Nathaniel Kleitman, this cycle is called the basic rest activity cycle, BREC. He realized that the same rhythmic patterns that govern our dreams also pulse quietly through our waking lives, and we, without knowing, betray them every single day. Here is where the problem begins. In a world that praises hustle, that glorifies exhaustion and busyness, we've learned to ignore the dip, the one that comes after 75 or 80 minutes of real work. That creeping brain fog, that twitch toward distraction, that phantom urge to check your phone or wander to the fridge. That's not laziness, that's biology. Your brain is asking for a break, not because you're broken, but because you're beautifully human. Modern productivity myths have us believing we should work like machines, steadily, linearly, without pause. But that model was built for factories, not for minds. Your brain doesn't think in straight lines, it pulses in waves. Early in a cycle, your dopamine levels rise, sharpening attention, focus clicks. You might call it flow, but as the 90-minute window closes, the system fatigues, cortisol rises, glucose depletes, you make mistakes, you drift. The body whispers, stop. If you obey, something astonishing happens. You shift into recovery. In those 15 minutes of pause, your brain activates the default mode network, DMN, the system responsible for daydreaming, long-range planning, and creative insight. This is why breakthroughs often arrive in the shower or on a walk, not in front of a spreadsheet. The rest is not the enemy of productivity, it is its silent twin. When you ignore this, you don't just get tired, you enter a physiological state of stress. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoning, slowly shuts down. Your body begins to run on adrenaline and irritation. You snap, you scroll, you spiral, and then you blame yourself, thinking you're not trying hard enough. But the truth is, you're working against the very architecture of your brain. Ironically, the best way to work more is to stop more. It sounds counterintuitive until you live it. The most effective way to structure your day is to work in focused, intentional 90-minute blocks, followed by 15-minute restorative breaks. Not rushed, distracted mini breaks, filled with email or doom scrolling. True rest, silence, movement, nature, breathing. These are not indulgences, they're recalibrations. The great performers of history understood this, even if they didn't know the science. Carl Jung would only write for 90 minutes, before walking for hours through the forest. Salvador Dali took deliberate afternoon naps in sunlit chairs. Einstein, too, structured his days around bursts of mental work and long, unstructured wandering. Their brilliance didn't come from non-stop effort, it came from honoring the wave. Multitasking, by contrast, is a myth. Each task switch drains your brain's limited fuel, glucose and oxygen, leaving you scattered and depleted. One study showed that constant switching can drop your productivity by up to 40%. The human brain is not designed to run multiple programs at once. It is designed for immersion, followed by disengagement. This is where structure becomes salvation. Imagine designing your day around your cycles instead of against them. You begin the morning with your most cognitively demanding task, writing, strategy, problem solving. You dive into it for 90 uninterrupted minutes. Then you step away, stretch, move, let your eyes find the sky. Your next block is lighter: calls, emails, logistics, another cycle, another rest. In this way, the day becomes not a grind, but a wave. You ride it, and in that rhythm, you recover something most people lose: joy in your work. But what about technology? It's the greatest disruptor of the 90-minute rule. Your phone, with its pings and pop-ups, slices your cycles into fragments. Every notification pulls you out of your wave prematurely, and each time you re-enter, it takes time, on average 23 minutes, to fully refocus. This is why deep work has become rare, not because we lack discipline, but because our environment steals our cycles. The solution is not to throw away your phone, it's to protect your rhythm. Turn off notifications, use focus timers, block social media, build rituals around your cycles. When you work, really work. When you rest, really rest. Productivity is not just about time, it's about energy, and energy, like breath, flows in and out. The science behind the 90-minute rhythm is still evolving, but its results are undeniable. Harvard studies show that deliberate rest improves not only mood, but memory and learning retention. When you rest, your brain doesn't power down, it reorganizes, files, repairs, muscles grow in recovery, so do minds. This is not about being perfect. Some days will flow, others will crash, but the 90-minute rule gives you a compass, a quiet structure that brings order to chaos. You no longer drift through your day, you sail it. Burnout doesn't come from working hard, it comes from working unnaturally. You weren't designed for flat effort, you were designed to pulse. You were built not for endless exertion, but for waves of brilliance, followed by gentle retreat. So give yourself permission to stop, to breathe, to do nothing, and to do it fully. Because when you respect the break, you restore the brain. When you align with your biology, you become unstoppable, not because you go faster, but because you go wiser. The 90-minute rule is not a trick, it's not a trend, it's a return to your own rhythm, to your own power. You don't need more hours, you need more harmony. And when you finally learn to ride the wave, you'll wonder how you ever worked any other way. Imagine this: you wake up, your eyes open not to the sun, but to a screen. Before your feet touch the ground, your thumb's already scrolling. News, messages, likes, alerts. Each ping feels small, trivial, forgettable, but it's not. It's chemical, it's precise, and it's changing you. The first lie is that your phone is just a tool, that you're in control. But tools don't interrupt your sleep cycle. Tools don't whisper during dinner. Tools don't sit in your pocket, silently vibrating like a phantom limb, demanding your attention. What you're holding is not neutral. It's a slot machine, an attention-draining, dopamine-flooding, habit-forming device. It is calibrated, not to help you, but to hook you, and it's working. In the last decade, rates of anxiety, attention deficit, and burnout have spiked across all age groups. Study after study links this not to trauma, poverty, or even diet, but to distraction. The endless fragmentation of presence, the constant interruption of thought. This is not accidental. This is architecture. Social platforms are not designed to be used. They are designed to be used constantly. Their algorithms learn what makes your brain light up and feed it to you endlessly. Each notification triggers a tiny hit of dopamine, a biochemical signal of pleasure and reward. It feels like connection. It feels like entertainment. but it's not. It's compulsion. Here's the hard truth. Your brain wasn't built for this. Dopamine is not a bad chemical. It's ancient. It helped your ancestors survive by motivating them to find food, shelter, and love. But now that same circuit is firing, not because of a real reward, but because of a digital simulation of one. You're not hunting. You're scrolling. You're not connecting. You're checking. Every ping, every swipe, every red badge taps the lever of your most primitive neurobiology, and you become trapped in a loop of craving. You scroll to relieve discomfort, boredom, loneliness, stress, but the scroll gives no relief. It only numbs, temporarily. And when it fades, the discomfort is still there, louder now, so you scroll again. Over time, your baseline dopamine levels fall. You need more to feel less. What once entertained you now bores you. What once thrilled you now exhausts you. And so you seek stimulation, not because it feels good, but because without it, you feel nothing. This is the digital dopamine trap, a feedback loop of short bursts of pleasure, followed by longer waves of depletion. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how disciplined. Your biology is older than your willpower, and it's being used against you. That's why the solution is not self-control, it's environmental design. It's not about being stronger, it's about being free. Enter the digital fast. This is not a detox, it is not a cleanse. It's not about punishing yourself or going off-grid. It's about reclaiming your attention, the most sacred, finite, and powerful resource you have. Attention is your life. Whatever you give it to, you feed. Whatever you ignore, you starve. And for most people today, attention is scattered across 1,000 pixels, 1,000 people, 1,000 pings, and so, they feel exhausted, without having done anything, dizzy, but not fulfilled, stimulated, but not awake. A digital fast begins with silence. You turn off notifications, you remove apps, you log out, you return your device to what it was meant to be, a tool, not a tether. The first hour feels strange. Phantom vibrations haunt your pocket. You reach for your phone, even when you know it's not there. This is withdrawal. This is neurochemical recalibration. You are not going crazy. You are healing. As the hours pass, you begin to notice something: stillness, not silence. Stillness, the kind of space where real thought forms, where memory sharpens, where emotion returns without being drowned in content. At first, boredom creeps in. You stare at walls, you fidget, you reach again. But then something shifts. The boredom opens a door, and behind that door is clarity. You remember what it feels like to finish a thought, to read a page and stay on it, to eat without filming it, to look at someone's face, not their filtered image, to hear your own breath, and not feel the need to fill the silence. This is what the screen took from you. Not just time, not just productivity, but intimacy, stillness, presence, and now you are taking it back. Dopamine resets begin after 24 to 48 hours. Your baseline levels begin to rise. Your cravings lessen. You find beauty again, in subtleties, a bird's song, the texture of a tree, the way light bends through the window at 4:12 p.m. You begin to dream differently, more vividly, because your mind is no longer saturated with fragments of others' lives. It's yours again. This is not romanticism. This is neuroscience. Researchers at Stanford and MIT have documented that regular smartphone use, especially social media, shrinks the prefrontal cortex's functional connectivity. This is the very part of your brain responsible for self-awareness, decision-making, and long-term planning. Meanwhile, digital overstimulation has been shown to increase gray matter in the amygdala, the center of fear, impulsivity, and emotional reactivity. This is not balance, this is rewiring. A digital fast allows your brain to reformat itself, to restore its natural rhythms. It allows your nervous system to come out of fight or flight. It allows your sense of time to return. Because the screen shatters time. It makes an hour disappear in 5 minutes. It fragments space. It makes 10 conversations feel like none. And it fragments you. People report higher self-esteem, sharper focus, and even a reduction in depressive symptoms after 3 days of intentional digital fasting. Why? Because the mind craves coherence, and coherence requires attention. Once you reclaim attention, the world looks different, colors seem brighter, sounds feel deeper, people become real again. You don't feel the need to document a moment, you feel the need to live it. You laugh without capturing it, you walk without tracking it, you wake up not to a phone, but to yourself. Digital fasting is not abstinence, it is agency. You get to decide when to be online. You choose what earns your attention. You give your brain back its natural cycles of focus and recovery, and in doing so, you become capable of what most people are now too scattered to achieve: depth, deep work, deep connection, deep stillness, deep joy. None of these are possible when your brain is in perpetual notification mode. But with a digital fast, you discover that attention is not just something you use, it's something you are. The quality of your life is the quality of what you attend to, and when your attention returns, so does everything else. Your creativity, your resilience, your self-trust, your sense of purpose, your capacity for awe. You begin to realize that most of what felt urgent wasn't. Most of what demanded your time didn't deserve it. Most of what stole your peace was designed to. You no longer chase the next ping, the next clip, the next like. You live your day as a full sentence, not a fragment. That is the power of digital fasting. It doesn't take you backward, it returns you to something timeless, something sacred, something that cannot be swiped or downloaded. Yourself. Before the world wakes up, before the birds even fully begin their songs, there exists a sliver of time. It's not long, and for most, it passes unnoticed. But in this time, something extraordinary is possible. Silence. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of distraction. The kind of quiet that is not just external, but internal. A state of being so rare in our modern lives that when you encounter it, you almost don't recognize it. And yet your nervous system does, your brain does, especially one part, the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the seat of consciousness, the command center of attention, planning, ethical judgment, and self-reflection. It's the part of your brain that makes you human, but it is also the slowest part of your brain to awaken. While your survival circuits, your limbic system, and amygdala can snap into action within seconds of waking, the prefrontal cortex takes longer. It needs space, it needs softness, it needs stillness, but most people don't give it that. Instead, they wake up to alarms, notifications, noise, music, news, messages. They flood their waking brain with demands, with opinions, with stimulation, and so the day begins not with clarity, but with cortisol. You reach for your phone, you open your inbox, you check your feed. Already, your brain has shifted into reactivity. It hasn't been given a chance to orient itself to the present. Instead, it's pulled into the needs, crises, and content of others. You haven't met your own mind, and already, you're answering the voices of strangers. But what if, instead, you began your day in silence? No music, no words, no input, just waking, sitting, breathing, existing in the quiet space before the world floods in. This is not asceticism, it's neuroscience. When you wake in silence, your prefrontal cortex is given room to come online gently. It is not forced into reaction, it is allowed to emerge. In this state, your thoughts are clearer, your judgments are kinder, your intentions become visible, not because they're imposed, but because they rise naturally. like mist from a still lake. In silent mornings, you begin to remember things that noise hides, emotions you've repressed, ideas you abandoned, dreams you dismissed. In silence, they return, not loudly, not dramatically, but truthfully. That is the power of silence. It reveals. Scientists have found that the brain actually reorganizes itself in quiet environments. Neuroimaging shows that silence stimulates the growth of new cells in the hippocampus, the region associated with memory and emotion. 2 hours of silence a day can increase neurogenesis, and just 2 minutes of uninterrupted quiet has been shown to lower blood pressure, reduce heart rate, and calm the autonomic nervous system more than relaxing music. Silence is not a void. It is a nutrient. Yet most people are malnourished. From the moment they wake up, they consume, not food, but information. Before coffee even touches their lips, their minds are flooded with the noise of thousands of inputs, each one a micro-stress, each one demanding a neurological response. What this does over time is train the brain to fear stillness, to resist introspection, to treat silence as boredom, and stimulation as safety. That's why the first time you try to begin your day in silence, it feels strange. You reach for your phone. You want to fill the space. Your body feels antsy. Your mind rebels. But this discomfort is not a problem. It's a signal. It's your nervous system saying, I forgot how to be alone with myself, and the only way to remember is to stay. So you sit. In the quiet, you watch your thoughts unfold like fog across a window. You notice your breath. You feel your body re-entering itself. You hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the building, the soft beat of your own pulse. Eventually, the silence is no longer empty. It's full of detail, full of presence, full of you. The greatest myth of the modern age is that we don't have time. But what we really don't have is attention, and we trade it away the moment we wake up. Silent mornings. Give it back. You don't need an hour. You don't need a mountain cabin. You don't need incense or yoga, or mantras. You just need to not speak, to not consume, to not respond, for 10 minutes, maybe 20, maybe 45. Long enough for the deepest parts of your cognition to awaken before the algorithms do. In that space, something subtle but sacred happens. You become self-directed. You don't just go through your day. You enter it. You author it. You choose. The silence lets you remember your priorities before other people rewrite them. It lets you feel what's real in your body before screens flatten it. It lets you prepare your mind for the demands of the world before the world makes its demands. This is not romanticism. This is a ritual of cognitive sovereignty. You've likely heard of morning routines, meditation, journaling, cold plunges, breathing exercises, all valuable, but they mean nothing if done in distraction, if done while a podcast plays, or the news blares, or your phone buzzes nearby. These are not silent rituals. They're rituals wrapped in noise. True silent mornings are rare, radical, and powerful because they do not add anything. They subtract, and in subtraction, they reveal. The brain's attention is like a spotlight. In the first minutes after waking, that spotlight is soft, like dawn light on the floor. It will focus where you point it, but if you don't aim it, someone else will. That's what makes silent mornings revolutionary. They are a quiet rebellion against noise, against urgency, against the hijacking of consciousness. They are a space where your brain can hear itself. In that hearing, you recover not just calm, but clarity, not just peace, but position. You remember where you are, who you are, what matters, and slowly this practice begins to shape the rest of your life. You no longer respond to every email,
as if it were a fire. You no longer jump at every vibration. You begin to trust that most things can wait, because you are here now, present, awake. That presence becomes contagious. People feel it when you speak. They feel it when you listen. They feel it in your eyes, because a person who has met their own mind in the morning silence is not easily shaken. They are grounded, calm, creative, and they carry that stillness into a world that has forgotten it. So tomorrow try this. Don't speak, don't scroll, don't listen, just wake and wait. Sit in the quiet of your own being. Let your thoughts form without guidance. Let your attention awaken before it is taken. Give yourself this gift, because in a loud world, silence is no longer just peace. It is power, and it's already inside you. Waiting.
You sit down to learn a new topic, a fresh article, a powerful insight. You read, you nod, you highlight. It feels familiar. It feels clear. You finish and think, I understand. But then someone asks, can you explain it? And your brain freezes. You stumble. You search for words. You repeat the jargon. You vaguely gesture, but the clarity you felt inside dissolves. You don't understand. Not really. You remembered, but you didn't own it. That's the illusion of understanding, and the only cure is teaching, not to a peer, not to an expert, not with fancy words, but to a child. This is the heart of the teach-back trick. Richard Feynman, Nobel Prize-winning physicist, knew this better than anyone. He believed that true mastery could be measured, not by what you could memorize, but by what you could simplify. He called it the ability to explain clearly what you understand deeply, and his method for reaching that depth was disarmingly simple. Step 1, learn something. Step 2, try to explain it, as if you're teaching it to a 5-year-old. Why a child? Because a child doesn't let you hide behind complexity. They don't know what neuroplasticity or aggregate demand means. You have to translate. You have to break it down. You have to see the concept for what it really is, without the fog of terminology. And here's the twist. When you do that, you don't just help the child understand, you help yourself, because teaching forces your brain into active recall. It forces structure. It reveals gaps. It transforms a passive idea into an internal model. Your brain is not a hard drive. It's not built for storage. It's built for simulation, for manipulating models of reality, not memorizing them. The teach-back trick activates this. When you prepare to teach, your hippocampus doesn't just retrieve facts. It rearranges them. It integrates, connects, and embeds the idea into long-term memory. By making it usable, you begin to own the knowledge, not just access it. And the more you simplify, the deeper it embeds. This is counterintuitive. Most people think intelligence means complexity, that smart people sound sophisticated. But in truth, the smartest people speak like storytellers. They turn complexity into metaphor. They don't impress. They illuminate. Feynman did this. Einstein did this. Carl Sagan did this. And so can you, because teaching is not the end of learning. It is the engine. In a world drowning in content, books, videos, lectures, what separates learners from masters is how they process it. Passive consumption leads to fleeting clarity. Active explanation leads to cognitive reassembly. When you try to explain something, you encounter 3 possible outcomes. You explain it easily. This means you truly understood. You hit a wall mid-sentence. This reveals the edge of your knowledge. You resort to buzzwords. This is a warning. You're reciting, not grasping. This is why the teach-back process is so powerful. It doesn't just test memory. It surfaces depth. Neuroscience confirms this. When we engage in retrieval-based learning, like teaching, we strengthen the neural pathways associated with a concept. When we do it in simple language, we activate the association cortex, the part of the brain that builds links between concepts. And when we connect ideas across domains, we create what psychologists call transfer learning. Transfer is the hallmark of real intelligence, the ability to take one idea and apply it elsewhere, to see a pattern in math that helps you understand music, to connect biology with business, to feel how history echoes in psychology. And none of this is possible if your knowledge is stuck in jargon. The teach-back trick unlocks transfer, because teaching to a child forces translation, and translation builds transfer. But there's another layer to this. It's not just about intelligence, it's about ego. To teach simply, you have to let go of trying to sound smart. You have to be humble enough to say, wait, I don't actually know what that means. Let me find a better way. You have to admit confusion, confront gaps, and dismantle the illusion of mastery. This is where most learners stop, at the wall of pride. But the greatest minds embrace that wall. They don't fear not knowing. They see it as the doorway to real knowing. That's the secret. You learn best when you admit you don't fully understand. Because confusion is not failure, it's feedback. When you teach, you get that feedback fast, and with it you grow. Imagine this. You read an article about black holes. Fascinating. Curved space, event horizons, gravitational singularities. You get it sort of. Then you try to explain it to your nephew. You say, a black hole is a region of space-time where gravity is so strong that you stop, you frown, you realize you don't know what space-time really means. You can't describe how gravity bends light. You vaguely remember the term escape velocity, but you can't define it. Now the real learning begins. You go back, you reread, this time with a purpose, not just to remember, but to explain. You say, okay, imagine a trampoline. Put a bowling ball on it. The fabric dips. That's gravity. Now roll a marble near the dip. It spirals inward. That's how planets orbit stars. A black hole is like a tear in the fabric. Once the marble crosses that edge, it can't come back. Suddenly it clicks. Not just for your nephew, for you. This is not just memorization. This is embodiment. The teach-back trick turns information into intuition. And intuition is what guides mastery. Not facts, not formulas. Feel. You don't just know what a black hole is. You feel it. You see it. And now it's yours. You can apply this to anything. Want to understand compound interest? Try teaching it to a 10-year-old using Lego bricks. Want to master cognitive biases? Explain them using examples from a playground. Want to remember a philosophy concept? Tell it like a bedtime story. Every time you teach down, you level up. Because the act of simplifying doesn't reduce intelligence, it refines it. This is what school forgot to teach you. Most education is performance. You memorize, you repeat, you test, you forget. But real learning is transformation. It's when your brain reshapes itself to accommodate a new model of reality. That only happens when you move from input to output. And that is exactly what teaching is. The teach-back trick is output-driven learning. It rewires the brain. It empowers the learner. It reveals the difference between knowing and understanding. And in doing so, it makes learning joyful again. Because when you teach something well, when you see someone else's eyes light up, you feel something profound contribution. You've passed on clarity. You've helped someone else level up.
and that reinforces your own growth. You remember better. You feel proud. You want to keep learning, so you can keep teaching. It becomes a virtuous cycle. Learn, teach, grow, repeat. This is how masters are made. Not by hiding knowledge, but by sharing it. Not by impressing, but by expressing. And not by knowing more, but by explaining better. So whatever you're learning today, stop halfway. Close the book. Look up. And ask yourself, could I teach this to a curious 8-year-old? If the answer is no, go deeper. Reframe. Simplify. Use metaphors. Use stories. Use questions. Then teach it. To a sibling. To a friend. To an imaginary class. To your dog. The moment you teach it simply, you'll feel it click, and you'll never lose it again.
You wake up, and before you even stretch, your mind opens a tab, the tab of not enough. Did I do enough yesterday? Will I do enough today? Am I falling behind? Will I ever catch up? The voice doesn't yell. It whispers. That's why it's so dangerous. It doesn't scream, you're failing. It says, you should be further. It says, everyone else seems faster, clearer, stronger. It doesn't call you lazy. It calls you late. And so the day begins not with breath, not with purpose, but with quiet, crushing comparison. You scroll. You see the highlights. Another launch, another engagement, another transformation, another perfect morning routine, with glowing skin and immaculate kitchen counters. And you shrink. You forget that you woke up too, that you got out of bed, that you fought thoughts nobody else sees, that you held your pain in silence and still moved forward, that you're still here, still trying. But that counts too, more than you know, because while the world glorifies milestones, what truly changes lives are moments, tiny, consistent, often invisible moments. One breath when you wanted to scream, one honest answer in a conversation to one sentence written in a blank document, one salad when you craved sugar to one pause before reacting. These are not small, they are not minor, they are wins, and if you learn to see them, your life will begin to change. That's the power of the daily win reflection. It asks one simple question at the end of each day. What is one thing I did today that moved me forward? Not what was perfect, not what was productive, not what looked impressive, just one thing that mattered, to one thing that meant you chose growth. At first, it feels awkward, too soft, too sentimental. Your mind, trained in the sharp language of goals and standards, resists. It wants to measure, to compare, to prove. But this reflection does the opposite. It humbles, it grounds, it humanizes. You begin to see yourself, not as a project to be completed, but as a person to be witnessed. Neuroscience supports this. The brain is not wired for satisfaction. It's wired for novelty and threat detection. That's why it easily forgets what went right. That's why you can accomplish 10 things and still obsess over the one that didn't go perfectly. But gratitude and recognition, even micro doses, reshape the brain. They strengthen the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for emotion regulation, decision-making, and reward tracking. Over time, this increases intrinsic motivation, the kind that doesn't need applause or adrenaline. Then most of all, it builds momentum, because motivation is not a lightning strike. It's not a mood. It's not inspiration. It's a direction, and that direction is built, brick, by what you notice. The daily win reflection trains you to notice forward motion, even if it's only 1 inch, even if no one saw it, even if it didn't fix everything, even if it hurt.
Because progress is rarely pretty. Growth rarely posts well. Healing is not symmetrical, but it happens in those tiny acts of defiance against the voice that says, "Why even try? You tried." That is the win, not the result, not the outcome, the act. You kept the promise, even if just for today. You sent the message you were afraid to send. You didn't shut down when things went sideways. You drank water when you wanted wine. You forgave yourself, just a little. That is momentum, and momentum is stronger than perfection, because perfection is a cliff. It demands all or nothing. It shames you into paralysis. It says if you can't do it right, don't do it at all. But momentum is a staircase. Even if you crawl, you climb. The daily win reflection builds that staircase. One line a night, one truth, one answer. What moved me forward? Eventually this becomes muscle memory. Instead of obsessing over what didn't go right, your mind starts scanning for what did. You begin your days with clearer intention, because you've trained yourself to care more about effort than optics. You don't just celebrate wins. You start to create them, because now you know what to look for. You start setting up tiny winnable goals. One page, one stretch, one clean meal, one conversation, one glass of water, one deep breath before reacting. And when the day ends, you see them. The voice that once said, "Not enough," now whispers you showed up, and over time, that whisper becomes belief. This is not romanticism. This is neuroplasticity. Your brain learns what you tell it to expect. If you train it to expect failure, it prepares for it. If you train it to expect small wins, it starts building toward them automatically. It's like compound interest. One reflection becomes 10, 10 become a habit becomes identity, and identity is where real change lives. Because when you identify as someone who notices growth, you start to live in a growth loop. And this loop does not depend on motivation. It doesn't crumble in chaos. It survives burnout. It survives setbacks. It adapts to life's noise. It stays, because it's built not on ambition, but attention. So when everything feels like it's falling apart, return to one question: what moved me forward today? Even if you barely survived, even if the only win was that you didn't give up, even if you're too tired to write it down, whisper it. Say it in the dark. I made it through today. I chose honesty when I could have lied. I asked for help. I paused before yelling. I didn't numb. I stood up when I wanted to hide. I did one thing for my future self. I remembered I'm worth the effort. You don't need more discipline. You need more witnessing. And that's what the daily win reflection is. A practice of witnessing yourself every single day. Not to judge, not to grade, but to see. To say that mattered. To say you mattered. Because in a world obsessed with metrics, you are allowed to measure differently. Not in miles but in movement. Not in trophies, but in truths. And not in perfection, but in progress. So tonight before you sleep, try it. Close your eyes, place your hand on your heart, and ask, what's one thing I did today that moved me forward? Then say thank you to yourself. Then rest. You earned it.
There is a doorway that opens each morning, brief, unassuming, easily missed. It exists before the emails, before the news, before the weight of productivity presses against your ribs. It opens in silence, and it leads outdoors. You don't need headphones. You don't even need a destination. You only need a body that moves and a mind that listens. Because somewhere between the first step and the 1,000th, something wakes up inside you that no screen, no to-do list, no motivational video can give. Your brain begins to breathe. This is not just poetic, it is neurological. When you walk, especially in the morning, especially without distraction, your brain activates a hidden network, one that scientists once overlooked, one that only lights up when you are doing nothing. It's called the default mode network, and it's where your most powerful thoughts live. Discovered in the early 2000s through fMRI scans, the DMN was initially seen as background noise, random brain chatter that activated when subjects were told to rest between tasks. But what researchers found stunned them. The default mode network wasn't noise. It was the source of daydreaming, memory recall, emotional integration, self-reflection, and most importantly, creative insight. In other words, the DMN is the mental space where your inner world comes alive, and the best way to activate it: walk without stimulation, first thing in the morning. No phone, no podcast, no multitasking, just you, the pavement, and the soft unfolding of thought. Because in that silence, your mind is free to wander, and wandering is not weakness, it is integration. You reflect not because you try, but because walking frees cognition from control. Modern life trains you to be linear, efficient, reactive, every second filled, every silence crushed, every corner of your brain occupied by doing. But the brain doesn't thrive in constant doing, it grows in the gaps. Morning walks create those gaps. They allow thoughts to drift, connections to form, problems to reorganize themselves quietly. While you listen to birds and count cracks in the sidewalk, you don't have to try to be creative. You just walk, and creativity arrives. Not like a lightning strike, but like a whisper, a pattern you've been missing, a sentence that completes itself, a feeling you hadn't yet named. This is what the DMN does. It assembles your mind behind the scenes, and walking is the trigger. Psychologists at Stanford discovered that creative thinking increases by up to 60% while walking. Other studies have shown that walking boosts divergent thinking, your ability to generate many different ideas around a single topic. Even better, these benefits continue after the walk ends, for up to 2 hours. But the effect is fragile. The moment you add distraction, your phone, your music, your notifications, the magic fades, the DMN quiets. Your brain switches into task mode, linear, focused, but closed. You lose access to your internal library. Your imagination shrinks. Your world narrows into the screen in your hand. This is not just habit, it's neurochemical. When you walk with input, your dopamine system is hijacked by novelty. Your brain stops reflecting and starts reacting. But when you walk in silence, another chemical rises, serotonin, the neurochemical of contentment, long view thinking, emotional processing. You feel grounded, present, real, and here's where it gets deeper. Morning walks don't just boost creativity, they restore agency. In a world that shouts react, walking says reflect. When you step outside, before you've been touched by the world, you meet your thoughts in their rawest form, unfiltered, unguided, and sometimes, yes, they hurt. You feel the anxiety under the silence, the grief beneath the sky, the uncertainty that the scroll once helped you suppress. But in that encounter, healing begins, because you no longer run from your thoughts. You walk with them, you become their witness, not their slave. This is what morning walks teach, that your mind is not a problem to solve, it's a space to walk through, and as you walk you remember that movement is medicine. The body stores emotion, the hips lock up when you're afraid, the shoulders tighten when you carry shame, the chest caves when your heart is hiding. But walking, especially slow, conscious, unhurried walking, begins to loosen what you didn't even know was clenched. It's not about steps or speed, it's about presence. Each step becomes a ritual, each breath, a compass. You're not walking to get somewhere, you're walking to remember where you already are. You are not behind, you are not broken, you are unfolding.
and every morning walk is a step further into yourself. The ancient Stoics knew this. So did Buddhist monks, so did Da Vinci, so did Durant, so did Thoreau. All walked for clarity, but for insight, for integration. They didn't walk for cardio, they walked for congruence. Because in the walk the inner and outer world begin to align. You notice beauty again, the moss on the sidewalk, the light pooling through branches, the smell of something blooming, the sound of your own footsteps. You begin to feel human again, not a user, not a content consumer, not a worker or follower, just you, conscious, alive, moving. And that small sacred act builds over time. Morning after morning, your mind becomes more spacious. You start the day with expansion, not contraction. You bring that spaciousness into your work, your relationships, your choices. You speak slower, you listen deeper, you react less, because you've practiced stillness in motion. You've begun your day with ownership, not absorption. And here's the beautiful paradox. The more regularly you walk, the less you feel like something is missing, because you've stopped looking for creativity and started making space for it. You've stopped chasing clarity and started walking toward it. And when the day ends and you look back, you won't remember every email, every ping, every scroll, but you will remember that walk, that quiet morning, that part of you that arrived before the world asked anything of you. And in that memory, you'll return again tomorrow, not because it's productive, not because it's aesthetic, but because in a world of noise, that walk is your one unclaimed hour. And sometimes, that's all it takes to reclaim yourself.
Most people eat for energy, for taste, for culture, for comfort, but almost no one eats for their brain. And yet inside your skull, a symphony plays every second. A symphony of neurotransmitters, tiny chemical messengers that govern how you think, feel, remember, focus, sleep, and connect. They are invisible, but they determine everything. Serotonin, dopamine, acetylcholine, GABA, glutamate, norepinephrine. They are not just brain chemicals, they are the architects of your reality, and they are made from what you eat. You are not what you eat. You are what your brain can build from what you eat. That's where the truth begins. Every emotion, every memory, every decision, every creative burst or burnout, spiral, is linked not just to psychology, but to biochemistry. And your biochemistry is shaped, meal by meal, by what you feed your neurons. And here's the twist. Your brain is ravenous. Though it only weighs about 2% of your body, it consumes over 20% of your daily energy intake, and it has no storage tank. It depends on a steady, clean stream of nutrients. No buffering, no cheat days. You skip a meal, your brain notices. You overload with sugar, your neurons fog. You starve, omega-3 says. Your synapses lose fluidity. You miss magnesium. Anxiety spikes. You ignore protein. Dopamine dips. You overeat junk. Inflammation rises. Memory fades. The brain keeps score. But here's the miracle. The brain also forgives. It is plastic, capable of healing, rewiring, regenerating, and food is the most direct signal of healing you can give it. That's the essence of a brain-boosting diet, not restriction, not shame, not another spreadsheet of macros, but nourishment at the level of mind and molecule. Let's begin with the molecule that made it all possible. Omega-3 fatty acids, specifically DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, and EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid. Your brain is 60% fat by dry weight, and DHA is the primary structural fat in the cerebral cortex. It maintains synaptic plasticity.
the ability of neurons to connect, adapt, and transmit information. It strengthens memory, enhances focus, and protects against neurodegeneration. Low levels of omega-3 CES have been linked to brain fog, mood disorders, cognitive decline, ADHD, depression, and the solution is not complicated. Fatty fish, like wild salmon, sardines, mackerel, trout, are nature's neural fuel. Just 2 servings per week radically improves cognitive function, according to multiple meta-analyses. If you're plant-based, algae oil is your best DHA, EPA source, not flax, not chia. Those contain ALA, a precursor that converts poorly. And remember, your brain doesn't store omega-3 CES well. You need consistency, like brushing your teeth. Now let's talk about antioxidants. Because your brain, for all its brilliance, burns hot, neurons fire constantly, and that firing creates oxidative stress, a biological rusting. If left unchecked, it ages the brain, mutates memory pathways, and triggers inflammation. Enter antioxidants, the microscopic warriors that clean up the molecular wreckage. Top brain-protecting antioxidant foods include blueberries, called brainberries, by neuroscientist Dr. James Joseph, rich in anthocyanins. They cross the blood-brain barrier and repair damaged neurons. Dark chocolate, 80% plus, high in flavonoids, increases cerebral blood flow and memory recall. Turmeric, with black pepper, contains curcumin, which boosts BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein critical for neural growth. Green tea contains catechins and L-theanine, the rare combination of calm plus focus. These aren't supplements, they're meals, they're messages. You eat color, you feed cognition. Now layer in protein, because neurotransmitters are made from amino acids. The building blocks of protein, dopamine, is built from tyrosine, found in eggs, cheese, chicken, lentils. Serotonin, from tryptophan, found in turkey, oats, nuts. GABA, from glutamine, found in cabbage, spinach. Bone broth, if you're not getting enough protein, especially early in the day, you're starving your brain of its primary communication ingredients. And no, cereal doesn't count. Start your day with eggs, with Greek yogurt, with tofu, with a protein smoothie, rich in plant or whey isolate. You'll feel the lift within days. But nutrients aren't the only input. How you eat matters as much as what you eat. That's where mindful eating enters, because in a distracted state, your digestion stalls, your cortisol rises, your body shifts from rest and digest to fight or flight. The nutrients may be there, but absorption drops. Mindful eating isn't a trend, it's a biological necessity. It means no screens while eating, slow chewing, 20-30 chews per bite, gratitude pause before starting, tuning into fullness, not finish lines. This changes digestion. Your gut-brain axis via the vagus nerve senses safety through slowness. It activates enzymatic breakdown. It tells your microbiome, we're calm, let's absorb. This is how food becomes fuel, not just filler. And while we're in the gut, know this: your gut is your second brain. It makes over 90% of your serotonin. It regulates immune function. It houses trillions of bacteria that shape mood, memory, and motivation. So feed them too. Prebiotic fibers, onions, garlic, leeks, bananas, fermented foods, kimchi, kefir, yogurt, miso, and polyphenols. Green tea, berries, olive oil. Keep your microbiome alive and your mind stable. Let's now build your plate. A brain-boosting meal looks like this. Breakfast, 2 eggs, plus sautéed spinach, in olive oil, blueberries plus walnuts, on top of Greek yogurt, green tea, lunch, grilled salmon, or tempeh quinoa, plus roasted broccoli, mixed leafy greens, with pumpkin, seeds, turmeric, lemon ginger dressing, snack, handful of almonds, plus 2 squares, dark chocolate, glass of water, with pink salt and lemon, dinner, lentil stew with carrots, kale, and garlic, side of sauerkraut, or pickled vegetables, warm chamomile, or rooibos tea. Every bite tells your brain, I want you to function, to grow, to endure. But there's one more layer, and it's subtle, ritual, because food is not just chemistry. It is narrative. When you make your meal slowly, cut mindfully, smell deeply, you reconnect eating with presence. You become someone who nourishes their thoughts before they even arrive. This rewires identity. You are no longer someone who eats mindlessly. You are someone who feeds your future self. And that self, that's the one who writes better, thinks clearer, reacts slower, sleeps deeper, remembers more, and lives more vividly. All from what you put in a bowl, quietly, with attention. That's the real brain hack. No app, no pill, no perfect diet plan, just food, real, whole, ancient food, paired with attention, and repeated, gently, daily. So next time you feel foggy, start with your fork. Next time you feel anxious, look at your plate. Next time you feel stuck, change your breakfast. Your neurons are listening, and they're hungry for what you haven't given them in years. Not just calories, but clarity.
It starts with a door, a metal handle, a tiled room, steam, silence. You stand at the edge, not of a cliff, but it feels like one. The temperature drops, your breath slows, a voice inside whispers, "Don't." But another, quieter voice responds, "Go." You reach for the faucet, and with one twist, your world changes. The cold hits you like truth. Sudden, sharp, honest, and you begin. This is not about hygiene, not anymore. This is about hormones, resilience, reclaiming agency over a nervous system hijacked by comfort, because your body isn't just skin and bone. It's electricity, it's chemistry, it's a conversation between primal biology and conscious will. And the cold is one of the oldest messengers in that conversation. For millions of years, humans lived with temperature variance, rivers, snow, wind, ocean. Our nervous systems evolved in contact with the raw edges of nature. But today, heated rooms, warm water, digital reward, emotional insulation, comfort is everywhere, and resilience has become rare. But cold doesn't lie, it doesn't wait, it doesn't compromise. When it touches your skin, it does one thing first: it wakes you up. Literally, within seconds of cold water contact, your body floods with norepinephrine, a neurotransmitter and hormone that increases alertness, vigilance, and mood regulation. It constricts blood vessels to preserve heat, sharpens focus, increases attention span, and boosts emotional readiness. You go from reactive to responsive, from foggy to ferociously present. Studies show that regular cold exposure increases norepinephrine by up to 530%, elevates dopamine by 250%, enhances mood long after exposure ends, strengthens the vagus nerve and parasympathetic regulation, reduces systemic inflammation, boosts mitochondrial health, supports immune resilience. But beyond the biochemistry lies something deeper, the ritual. Because cold showers aren't comfortable,
That's the point. They are daily invitations to discomfort, to voluntary stress, to practice emotional neutrality in the face of physiological panic. When you step under cold water, your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, lights up. It says danger. It says run. It says make it stop. But you don't run. You breathe. You stay. And in that staying, something shifts. The signal changes. The panic fades. A new signal emerges. I can hold this. That moment, that tiny second of nervous system override, is where resilience is born, because cold exposure is not about masochism. It's about training your system to find stillness inside chaos. Over time, your response transforms. What once triggered gasping now invites clarity. You stop fighting. You start adapting. That is neuroplasticity in action. Your autonomic nervous system, which normally runs below consciousness, begins to sync with your breath, your focus, your intention, and each day you return to the cold, you strengthen that link. You don't just endure stress, you alchemize it, because the same nervous system that flinches under cold also reacts to traffic, arguments, deadlines, and grief. So when you master the shower, you're not just building heat tolerance, you're rewiring your reactivity. This is emotional strength, not built through thought, but through sensation. Cold showers are somatic therapy for a dysregulated generation, and they don't require anything but courage. No gym, no gear, just a faucet, and a few minutes of silence. What happens in those minutes? The body shakes, the mind screams, but the breath becomes a weapon. Breathe slowly, through the nose, out through the mouth. Count 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out. Again, you're not breathing just to calm down. You're telling your vagus nerve, it's safe, and safety changes chemistry. Your heart rate slows. Your blood vessels learn elasticity. Your brain floods with calm alertness. Your immune cells activate. Your mitochondria, the energy engines inside every cell, light up. You're no longer surviving. You're building. And when the cold ends, you step out transformed. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. You did what was hard, on purpose. And that rewrites identity. You are no longer someone who needs motivation. You are someone who acts, even when it's uncomfortable. That is character, and character shows up everywhere. In conversations, in crisis, in consistency, all trained in 5 minutes under cold water. But this isn't a life hack. It's not about being better. It's about being braver. Of pain you, mind brought to me, unsolved. Cold showers are a mirror. They show you your resistance. They teach you how to hold it. And then they remind you that nothing outside you can shake the strength you built within. Not superstition, it's hormonal training. It's neurological discipline. And it's the fastest way to feel alive when the world makes you numb. Try this. Set a timer, 90 seconds. Start warm if you need, then go cold. Let it hit your neck, your chest. Breathe. Don't clench. Don't run. Notice. Let the discomfort rise. Let the breath soften. Repeat daily. Not to impress anyone, not for Instagram. For the nervous system you have to live inside forever, because every cold shower becomes a ritual of becoming more stable, becoming more alert, becoming more you, not the distracted version, not the anxious one, the clear one, the calm one, the one who doesn't fear sensation, but uses it. That's the real you. And it's waiting, behind the faucet, just one twist away.
There's a moment after the day begins to fade, when your body speaks differently, not through urgency, not through exhaustion, but through a quiet question. Can we move? Not far, not fast, but meaningfully. You don't need cardio. You don't need sweat. You don't need goals. You need connection to your body, to your nervous system, to your breath, to yourself, because the hours before sleep are sacred, and what you do with your body during this window can shape not only how you rest, but how you rewire. This is the power of light evening movement, gentle stretches, slow yoga, breath-led flows, intuitive motion. It may seem small, too soft to matter, but beneath that softness lies one of the most powerful biological miracles your body knows: the release of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. BDNF is a protein, but not just any protein. It's the fertilizer of your neurons. It encourages neurogenesis, the birth of new brain cells, synaptic plasticity, how well neurons connect and communicate, long-term memory formation, mood resilience and stress buffering, cognitive repair after emotional or physical exhaustion. BDNF is how your brain grows stronger from experience. Then movement, especially slow, non-strenuous, rhythmical movement, is one of the best-known natural stimulators of BDNF. But there's a paradox here: too much intensity, cortisol spikes, BDNF drops; too sedentary, neurogenesis slows; too late, sleep gets disrupted; too soon, you carry the day's stress into stillness. But gentle evening movement, that's where the sweet spot lives. Not too much, not too little, not to burn calories, to signal the body, we're safe now. Let's talk biology. During slow, conscious movement, like yin yoga, mobility flow, somatic stretching, the following happens: your parasympathetic nervous system activates, heart rate lowers, your cortisol curve flattens, no spikes, no crash, your vagus nerve lights up, calming inflammation and easing digestion. Your hippocampus, the memory center, receives a gentle pulse of BDNF, aiding overnight consolidation. Your muscle fascia uncoils, releasing physical emotion stored from the day. You don't even need 60 minutes. You need presence. 15 to 30 minutes of slow breath-synced movement is enough to shift your state from do and being, from tension expansion, from noise integration. Why evening? Because evening is a neurological threshold. Your body is preparing to shift into repair mode. But most people miss this window. They go from overstimulation to total collapse. TV, lights, screens, stimulants, then crash. No bridge, no descent. And the nervous system doesn't like cliffs. It prefers gradual downshifting. Evening movement gives you that. It becomes a bridge from beta wave doing to theta wave drifting. Let's break it down into layers. Layer 1, the physical. Your body stores the day. Shoulders hold conversations you didn't finish. Hips carry meetings you never wanted to join. Jaw tension keeps secrets. Calves coil with deadlines. Your spine carries it all. Slow movement unlocks these vaults, not by force, but by permission. You give your body permission to unwind, to expand, to soften, and in doing so, you unfreeze emotions you didn't know were trapped. You cry in pigeon pose. You sigh in child's pose. You feel warmth in your ribs that wasn't there an hour ago. This is not weakness. This is release. Layer 2, the neurochemistry. As your body moves, your brain listens. It releases BDNF, which nourishes neurons. Endocannabinoids, which reduce anxiety. GABA, the calming neurotransmitter that prepares you for sleep. Oxytocin, if your movement includes touch or safe presence, your brain becomes more receptive,
more open. That's why many people get their best ideas in the evening stretch, their deepest peace during breathwork, their clearest self after a yin session, because in the slowness, the subconscious rises. Layer 3, the identity movement, is not just mechanical, it's narrative. Every time you move in a calm, nourishing way, you reinforce a self-image. I take care of myself. I am worth this pause. This changes how you show up the next morning. You don't wake up into stress. You wake into continuity, a version of you who was kind to yourself last night. And that version carries power. This is how identity forms, not from goals, from rituals. Let's make it real. Evening movement. Ritual 20-30 minutes. Turn off bright lights. Use warm soft light or candles. Put on gentle ambient music or silence. Start on the floor. Cat-cow. Child's pose. Deep side stretches. Breathe slowly. Inhale 4. Exhale 6. 8s. Do 4. 6 positions, each held for 2-3 minutes. Hip openers. Spinal twists. Legs up the wall. Close with 5 minutes in Savasana, or seated meditation. Hands on chest and belly. No pressure, no tracking, no performance. Just you, returning to your original rhythm. Now let's talk sleep. This kind of movement prepares your sleep architecture. It increases slow wave sleep, deep restorative sleep. It decreases sleep latency. You fall asleep faster. It boosts overnight BDNF release, especially in REM cycles. It softens cortisol curves, so you wake up calmer. And most of all, it makes you feel safe enough to rest, because you cannot rest when your nervous system doesn't trust the world. Evening movement builds that trust. Over time, this becomes more than habit. It becomes medicine, a daily ceremony, a gentle rehearsal for stillness, a nervous system anchor. And in a world that constantly asks you to push, this becomes your way of saying, I choose to listen instead, because your body isn't just a tool, it's a messenger. And in the quiet of evening, it finally has the space to speak. You just have to meet it, slowly, kindly, with movement that says, I see you, I'm here, we made it through another day, and now, let's let it go.
There is a moment, almost invisible, when something inside you tilts forward. You read a sentence, hear a phrase, notice a fragment of a question, and something shifts. A tiny signal lights up in the mind. What is that? Why does that happen? Could I understand this if I followed the thread? That signal, so soft, it can be missed by everything loud in life, is curiosity. And it is not a luxury. It is not a side effect of intelligence. It is not a mood. It is a biological ignition system, embedded deep inside the brain, waiting only for permission to fire. What happens next is quiet, but extraordinary. The moment you feel curious, your brain begins to change. You haven't even found the answer yet. You haven't taken action. You've simply leaned in mentally, and in that moment, your dopaminergic system activates. The brain treats the act of wanting to know as rewarding. That's the secret. The reward is not in having the answer. The reward is in wanting the answer. That's why curiosity is self-perpetuating. It fuels the process of learning, not just the outcome. In a brain scan, that moment looks like the lighting of a city from above. The ventral tegmental area, which produces dopamine, pulses. The hippocampus, which stores long-term memory, primes itself. The prefrontal cortex, which focuses attention, sharpens, all because you asked a question with genuine interest. The human brain is built to explore, but modern life rewards execution over inquiry. Schedules, deadlines, optimization, everything is designed to keep you inside the known, the measurable, the trackable. But the most powerful moments of mental transformation do not begin with pressure, they begin with wonder. A topic, a sentence, a strange fact, a historical moment you never quite understood, a biological function you took for granted. a word you've heard 100 times, but never truly defined. Curiosity hour is the radical act of making space for that wonder, not for work, not for tasks, for learning what pulls at you, for giving yourself 1 hour a day, or even half, to explore, not because you have to, but because something in you wants to. That one act shifts everything. It turns your learning system from reactive to generative. You no longer consume knowledge because you must. You chase it because your brain is now on a chemical quest. This isn't just inspiring, it's structural. Your memory improves when you're curious. Your mood lifts. You become more flexible cognitively. Studies have shown that people retain more information, even unrelated information, when they're curious about what they're learning. That means if you read about space travel out of pure interest, and in that same hour study language vocabulary, your brain anchors both more deeply. The reward signal leaks into the rest of the learning. That is how curiosity amplifies cognition. The design of Curiosity Hour is simple. You begin with a question, any question. It might be tiny. Why do we yawn? What's the origin of the $sign? Why do cats purr? It might be profound. What is time dilation? How does neuroplasticity actually work? Is there a mathematical structure to music? The size doesn't matter, the sincerity does. It has to matter to you, even if only today. That is the key. The brain knows when a question is real. From there, you follow the thread, a video, an article, a book, a documentary, a white paper. You let the hour become a tunnel of depth. Then something odd happens when you do this consistently. Your threshold for mental presence increases. You can focus longer, not because you forced it, but because you've reassociated learning with pleasure. The dopamine circuits of your brain begin to fire, not when you're entertained, but when you're engaged. Curiosity also unlocks lateral thinking. As you learn across domains, you begin to see patterns. The geometry of flowers mirrors algorithms in machine learning. The structure of bark resembles molecular sequences. The logistics of Roman trade routes mirror modern supply chains. These aren't forced analogies. They are emergent insights. You did not plan for them. You stumbled into them because you allowed the brain to roam. And as you roam, something deeper begins to form. A quiet, self-sustaining identity. You become someone who loves learning, not because it's productive, because it's joyful, because the act of connecting ideas has become its own source of energy. That's why Curiosity Hour isn't a tool, it's a transformation. It alters not what you know, but who you are while knowing. But here's the real beauty. Curiosity softens emotion. Anxiety is rigid. Depression is closed. Curiosity is open, mobile, forward-moving. When you are curious, you cannot be simultaneously frozen. Curiosity is movement, and that movement makes it healing. It doesn't erase difficulty. It makes difficulty workable. That's why in trauma recovery, curiosity is a milestone. The day someone starts asking again, why did this happen? Or how does this work? That is the day the nervous system begins to re-engage with life. Curiosity Hour can happen anywhere. In a quiet corner with a book, on a walk with a podcast, at a table with a notebook, and a question at the top of the page. The content doesn't matter, the choice does. It has to come from within you, not from a syllabus or a demand. That's the rule. It has to be something you want. That's what lights the circuits, and when it lights them, the effects ripple outward. You become more articulate. You ask better questions in conversation. You listen more deeply, because you've practiced attention without expectation. You stop zoning out in meetings, not because you forced alertness, but because your cognitive endurance has expanded. You're simply more present in life, because you've practiced presence in study. What you'll find, the longer you keep the habit, is that your internal landscape becomes richer. You think better not because you are smarter, but because your neural connections are wider, more flexible, more playful. You draw metaphors across fields. You explain things clearly.
You remember facts not as isolated trivia, but as stories connected to the emotion of discovery. Over time, curiosity builds a new architecture of self-trust. The more you answer your own questions, the more you believe, I can figure things out, and that belief becomes your foundation for future uncertainty. You face challenges with less panic and more patience, because your brain has rehearsed the loop. Not know and seek and discover as understanding integrating. That loop becomes your confidence, and this confidence is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't posture. It simply acts. It asks. It learns. Again and again. So you keep showing up. 1 hour, one question, one rabbit hole at a time. You let the dopamine of wonder replace the dopamine of distraction. You let focus become a gift, not a struggle. You let the joy of knowing dissolve the fatigue of obligation, and slowly, you become someone else, someone more present, more intelligent, more emotionally integrated, more lit up from within. Because Curiosity Hour isn't a habit, it's a return to the way you were before the world taught you to ignore your questions. And when you return, you remember, you never lost your intelligence. You just stopped listening to the spark that leads you there.
Every day feels like a repeat. Breakfast tastes the same as yesterday. Conversations are familiar. The news blends together. Only the names change. Even your thoughts. The same, slightly reshaped, but recognizable. There's noise in your head, but no movement. Everything is familiar, tested, manageable, and in that familiarity, there is no growth. Not because you're lazy, but because your brain has locked itself into efficiency, and efficiency, without novelty, is the slow atrophy of thinking. There's only one thing that changes this, small, inconspicuous, like a spark. It's a new question, not a grand, world-changing one, but one that unexpectedly hooks you. Why are gills red? How does Wi-Fi work? Why can't you sleep after caffeine, but can after white noise? What is emotional intelligence on a hormonal level? Why does skin wrinkle in water? Each of these questions is an explosion in the routine, not a school like you must know this, that a brain like this is genuinely curious. And this is the moment cognitive flexibility begins. The brain doesn't get stronger through discipline alone. It recovers through wonder. When you ask yourself a new question, it triggers what neuroscience calls the orienting reflex, a natural response to novelty. The amygdala wakes up, the reticular activating system locks in, and then dopamine kicks in, not for the answer, for the question itself. Because dopamine doesn't reward results. It rewards the expectation of discovery. That's why we talk about a 5-minute curiosity burst, not as learning, but as a daily cognitive stretch, not a marathon, not a course, not a book a month, just one random spark a day. Once a day, you pause, you look around, to open a small question, your own or a random one, and you give yourself 5 minutes to try and answer it. It's not about knowing everything. It's about shifting your thinking, reclaiming the ability to think without pressure. You open a question like a window, and in that moment, the brain activates the prefrontal cortex, logic, planning, hypotheses, disrupts the default mode network. The daydream circuit boosts acetylcholine for focus, gently triggers the dopamine novelty-seeking system. Your neurons start signaling differently. 5 minutes, one question, and the world is no longer the same. Even more importantly, your mental map expands. A question isn't just knowledge. A question is a new map in your mind. You don't just learn why the sky is blue. You realize the world isn't a wall. It's a structure you can read. Questions bring matter to life, and the brain begins to behave like a child's, not because of naivety, but because of active presence. Children have the highest neuroplasticity, not because their cortex is fresh,
but because they constantly ask. Adults stop asking, and the cortex stiffens. Life shrinks to repetition. The 5-minute burst is a return to freshness, to perception, to neuroplasticity, to emotional adaptability, and most intriguingly, cognitive flexibility is directly tied to emotional resilience. People with high flexibility adapt to change faster, are less prone to catastrophizing, regulate anxiety better, switch focus more easily, are less stuck in looping thoughts. And one of the most reliable ways to build this flexibility is not through rigid thinking, but through playful thinking. That's what a daily random question gives you. Even if you don't find the answer, your neurons have already started building hypotheses, and that activates neural loops that strengthen working memory, intellectual intuition, attentional switching, flexible thinking in new challenges. Every question is a mini rehearsal of real-time thinking. You train mental speed, perspective shifts, and originality without even noticing. Your brain no longer just knows, it moves. Now imagine doing that every day. 5 minutes, 365 times, 365 new topics, directions, and connections. Imagine the web of knowledge your mind creates, the cognitive confidence that builds, the sense of freedom that comes just from the ability to ask and explore. It's not just a skill, it's self-respect on the level of thought, because you no longer see the unknown as a threat. You see it as an invitation, and that changes everything. You enter new conversations without fear, listen to complex topics without tension, expand your thinking without shame, because your brain was trained to be curious, not perfect. And in that lies the greatest power, because it's not genius that makes us adaptable, it's the questions.
Everyone wants to fall asleep easily, to close their eyes, sink into silence, and disappear from the noise of days and events. But what actually happens when we fall asleep? What does the brain do when we finally let the day go? And can we direct this nightly movement, not just toward rest, but toward resolution? There is an answer. The brain doesn't sleep, it transforms. As the body goes still and consciousness drifts away, neural networks remain active. They repackage information, they search for patterns, they simulate futures, and most importantly, they continue to process tasks left unfinished. The unfinished is the key, because what remains open, the brain refuses to let go. And that's the essence of a practice called the One Problem Journal. It's not a diary of events, not a stream of consciousness, not an emotional dump. It's a thinking anchor. You take one unresolved moment, one knot, one real challenge, unanswered, and you phrase it as a question. That part is crucial. Not a complaint, not a frustration. A question. How can I say this and still be honest? What have I overlooked in this situation? Why am I delaying the decision? How would this be simple if I'm the one making it complex? What step is actually closer than I think? You're not trying to solve it. You're just initiating it. And then you close the notebook, turn off the light, go to sleep. And then one of the most mysterious and powerful phenomena in neurobiology takes place: unconscious thinking during sleep. Scientific studies have shown that during sleep, particularly during slow-wave sleep and REM, the brain continues to work on emotionally meaningful, yet unresolved problems. This process is known as targeted memory reactivation, a directed mechanism where the brain searches for solutions using abstract associations, imagery, and subconscious linkages. That's why sometimes you wake up with a phrase, "I kind of know what to do now." It's not magic.
It's neural integration. But there's a condition. The brain needs to know what to pay attention to. That's exactly what the One Problem Journal does. It acts like a focusing lens. It cuts out the noise. It gives your subconscious a signal. This is the knot. Don't solve everything. Just this. And through the night, the brain sifts through experiences, emotions, knowledge, and behavioral models to find a move you didn't notice while awake. It won't always be a full answer, but often it's a sense of direction, a feeling of relief, the recognition that something within you has already started to shift. What's astonishing? This mechanism activates even without logical effort. All it needs is a clearly stated question, an intention, and the silence of sleep. This is how deep resolution is born. You might wonder, how is this even possible? Does the brain think without us? Yes, it always has. The subconscious is not a passive zone. It's an active factory of associative thinking. Its speed is hundreds of times faster than conscious thought. Its reach is broader, because it sees what we miss. Studies show if you write down an unresolved problem before bed, within a few days, dreams, morning thoughts, or even random ideas begin to bring new hypotheses. It's not magic. It's structured presence in sleep-based cognition. One problem, one question, each day. Even if you don't solve it immediately, you're training your brain to work in depth. This is a new kind of discipline, not to push harder through the night, but to release in a direction. And in that release, neurological wisdom arises. When it becomes a ritual, everything changes. You carry less anxiety into the night. You rarely wake up with racing thoughts. You more often gain insight in the morning. Your trust in your own brain grows. Your psyche learns to live in process, not just results. The brain loves clarity. It works better when given questions, not demands, not panic, but a clear, open invitation to explore. That's why writing matters. Writing by hand. Because the hand activates the motor cortex. Because writing is an emotional act. Because a handwritten note is an anchored intention. It tells the brain this matters. This is allowed. This isn't anxiety. It's a task, and the brain carries it into the night. When done regularly, you don't just become someone who thinks. You become someone who thinks even while asleep. You don't seek answers under pressure. You place the problem under the light of the unconscious. And in the morning, soft clarity often arrives. No drama, no breakthrough. Just, I know how to say this. I know where to start. I see what was holding me back. Sometimes it's a single phrase. Sometimes a mood. Sometimes a sudden call you finally dare to make. That is the outcome. Because you're working with your brain, not against it. One problem, each evening. One approach. No force. Just attention. This is not a solution journal. It's a collaboration with your subconscious. Thinking doesn't always mean tension. Sometimes it means listening in silence.
There are days when you remember, when you wake up, and inside, there's a clear signal. You know where you're going. You know what for. Your movement needs no proof. It is internal. But there are days when everything blurs. Days when the small things are louder than the purpose. When the world says, this matters now, and this, and also this, and you forget, not the goals, but the sense of connection to them. Your inner compass disappears. All that's left is just survive today. And it's in these moments that a simple but profound practice gains meaning. Thousands of times underestimated. It changes everything when done right. It's called the vision reminder. Not a vision board, not a glossy photo on the fridge, but a living system that visually, physically, biochemically, tells your brain every day, here's why we rise, here's where we're going, here's why today is not random. Your dopamine system is a navigational mechanism. Its job is to move you from the present toward the future. Dopamine isn't about pleasure. It's about the anticipation of reward. It's the fuel of desire. It flares when it sees a link between effort and meaning. If your goal is distant, abstract, invisible, dopamine fades. The system stops believing, not because you don't care, but because it lacks a visible confirmation of direction. You're not a robot. You're a being that needs cues, not only internal ones, but external images that recalibrate your psyche daily. A vision reminder is like a compass in the room, something you see every day, and your brain, even unconsciously, says, "Oh right, I'm not random. I have a path." It could be an image, a phrase, a photo, a diagram, a symbol, a drawing, a plan. But the key is, it must be visible, not in your phone, not buried in a file, but on your wall, on your desk, next to your mirror, because visual contact equals sign neural signal, but a neural signal equals sign activation of the prefrontal cortex. Simply put, when you see your vision, your brain's executive center lights up. That's the part responsible for making decisions, suppressing impulses, modeling the future, evaluating scenarios, maintaining consistency. Exactly what you need to choose the long term over the immediate. Because life's struggle is often this instant comfort versus delayed purpose. So when we talk about a vision reminder, we're not talking about aesthetics, we're talking about neurobiological training in endurance. You see the goal, and the reward system says, we can wait, because we know why. Studies show that people who regularly engage with visual representations of their long-term goals have higher motivation, are less prone to impulsive actions, return to rhythm faster after setbacks, feel less emotionally drained as background noise decreases. This isn't magic, it's contextual memory. Context means remembering that today's no is part of tomorrow's yes. Context means seeing that small progress isn't meaningless. It fits the picture, and that picture should be in front of you, not once a month, but every single day. Because the world steals your attention, and every day, either you remind yourself where you're going, or someone else will remind you where they want you to go. The choice is yours. Interestingly, a vision reminder doesn't have to be a motivational quote. It needs to be a personal marker of meaning. For some, it's a photo of a future workshop. For others, a diagram of the body they're striving for. For someone, words their dying grandmother once said. For another, the logo of a startup that doesn't yet exist, or a quote that whispers, "I am more than my exhaustion." It should be emotional, not logical, because dopamine responds to excitement, not explanation. Each time your brain sees this image, it says, "Oh, that's ours, that's not marketing, that's our fire." Even if you don't consciously register it, your subconscious aligns. It reduces doubt, it quiets noise, it sharpens will. The habit of seeing your goal is like training your eyes before aiming a shot. The target doesn't change, but your focus becomes precise, and here begins the real alchemy. You're not just working, you're moving in a direction your nervous system recognizes as meaningful. That is what motivation truly is. Not get up and fight, but remember why you get up at all. You can have the best plans, the clearest systems, the strongest logic, but if your brain doesn't see a vision of the future daily, it defaults to the immediate. Because the immediate is visible, the distant is abstract. The vision reminder makes the distant feel real, and the more often you look at it, the more your psyche chooses direction over distraction. It's like aligning a compass, a few millimeters each day, in the moment, almost unnoticeable, but after a month, a whole new horizon. So when you're tired,
when you've slipped, when you've given up, when you didn't make it, when it hurts. You look up, you see that, and you remember. Yes, this is why I'll begin again tomorrow. The vision reminder isn't about never stopping, it's about coming back, because memory tends to erase the deep things under the pressure of the daily. But an image doesn't fade, because it doesn't just remind you, it reactivates the dopamine chain, and you're back in the game, not by force, but through inner permission.
We give it a third of our lives, uncontrollably, completely. We switch off, lie still, and disappear. No other creature does it as deeply and regularly. No other process seems so passive, and at the same time so essential, that lacking it destroys everything: mood, body, memory, meaning. This is sleep. And if you feel the urge to fix your sleep schedule, know this: it's not about time. It's about sacredness. It's about finally stopping the habit of treating sleep as a technical pause, because sleep is not a pause. It is an internal revolution. You think you've fallen asleep, but your brain gets to work. After 16 hours of activity, it has one mission: to restore you fully and deeply. During sleep, it's not rest that happens. It's cleanup, repair, and reconstruction. While you sleep, you lose control, but your brain takes over more than you imagine. It sorts memories, keeping what matters and erasing what doesn't, boosts your immune system, initiates the birth of new brain cells, neurogenesis, flushes out toxins accumulated during the day, synchronizes hormonal cycles, activates emotional regulation systems, resets your capacity for clear thinking. This is not metaphor. This is molecular defense. And if you treat sleep like the last thing on your to-do list, you're sabotaging your recovery center. Lack of sleep is not just tiredness, it's neural erosion. Your brain has no backup battery. It has only the night. And when you ignore it, you don't get the time to cleanse yourself. In 2013, researchers at the University of Rochester discovered a system that had long been a mystery: the glymphatic system. It's the brain's internal sewage mechanism that activates only during sleep. It clears out beta amyloid and tau proteins, the very ones that accumulate in Alzheimer's disease, only at night, only in deep sleep. No daytime activity can substitute for it. No coffee, diet, meditation, or neurohack can compensate. Sleep is the only way. But cleansing is just one part. The other is memory. While you sleep, your brain doesn't just rest. It shelves the day. This is memory consolidation. Everything you heard, felt, thought, goes through an internal filter. The hippocampus converts temporary traces into long-term neural pathways. Without sleep, they don't stick. Knowledge fades. Insights disappear. Experiences evaporate. And beyond storing the old, sleep creates the new. Because during REM sleep, your brain forms unconventional connections. That's when creativity happens. That's when you find solutions that seemed impossible during the day. Why did Tesla see mechanisms in dreams? Why did Kekulé discover the structure of benzene in a dream? Why did Paul McCartney hear the melody of Yesterday in his sleep and doubt it hadn't already been written? Because during sleep, the brain is no longer bound by logic. It allows itself to connect the distant, and if you've given it a task before sleep, sometimes it brings back the answer in the morning, quietly, no fanfare, just a feeling. Something makes sense now, and that's just the beginning. The third, and most subtle yet most crucial, function of sleep is neurogenesis, the birth of new neurons. Yes, the brain is not static.
It's capable of growth, even in adulthood, especially in the hippocampus. But for this, it needs one thing: deep, regular, high-quality sleep, because only during sleep does the brain produce BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a key substance for neural growth. The deeper your sleep, the more your brain can regenerate. So now imagine, every night is not inactive time, but an operation to preserve your cognitive identity. Now recall, how many times have you sacrificed sleep to get things done? How many times have you said, "It's fine, I'll catch up later"? How many times have you woken up already feeling drained? Now listen, when you place sleep last, you do the same with your mind, with your stability, with your brain, with yourself. That's why sleep defense is not about time management. It's about restoring the sacred. It's about creating an inner culture of sleep, treating the evening not as leftover time, but as a gateway through which your tomorrow's clarity passes. When you switch off the lights, it's a gesture. When you put away your phone an hour before, it's an act of care. When you allow yourself a ritual, slow breathing, soft transition, it's not weakness, it's inner leadership in action. You no longer sacrifice sleep, you protect it, because through it, you restore strength, resilience, the ability to think, the power to choose, the capacity not to break. Sleep is the foundation, and defending it is not a luxury. It's the survival strategy of a conscious mind. In a world that demands constant stimulation, sleep defense is a daily no to external noise, a quiet, persistent loyalty to yourself. It's how you build a home your brain can return to live, and to grow.
There are evenings when you lie in bed, and your body feels heavy, like stone. Your eyelids lower on their own. The air in the room is calm. Everything seems perfect for sleep, but inside, it's a different story. Your mind spins. It won't shut off. The inner screen stays lit. Dark bursts of thoughts. What to say tomorrow, what not to forget, how to respond, what to buy, what to start, what you didn't finish again. Memory hums like a server room, and you don't fall asleep, not because your body isn't tired, but because inside, there's a buildup of the unfinished. This isn't just thinking, it's mental load, and if it isn't offloaded, sleep becomes a battle. We're used to thinking that exhaustion comes from fatigue, but there's another kind, not physical, a cognitive overload that builds up not in the muscles, but in the cerebral cortex. It's when the brain isn't given permission to end the day, because to it, everything is still open, like browser tabs, like half-written sentences, and most importantly, it remembers them all. That's why, if you don't unload the mental weight before sleep, you stay switched on, even in the dark. This isn't a metaphor, it's neurophysiology. The brain has a deep tendency to hold on to unfinished tasks. This has been long studied, and is called the Zeigarnik effect, discovered in the 1920s, when students were asked to complete tasks, then interrupted. Researchers found that unfinished actions were remembered far more strongly. The brain grabs them. They become active files that can't be closed, and they are what create the feeling. I'm not ready to sleep yet, even when your body is. That's why the practice of the mental load dump is not journaling. It's not planning. It's a neuropsychological ritual of release. It's when before bed, you take a piece of paper, or open a note, and write down everything still spinning in your head, not to analyze, not to solve, just to clear space. Everything that's pressing, everything that's unfinished, everything your brain would otherwise carry into the night. Then when you do this, something shifts. At first, subtly, but internally, it gets quieter, because when a thought is written down, the brain receives a signal, file saved. You can close it now. That gives it permission to switch modes, from reactive to restorative,
And this is what we miss when we just go to bed late and try not to think. Here's the secret. The brain can't not think, it can only shift context. But to do that, it must release the active one. That's why mental load dump works. It doesn't stop thoughts, it lets them out, without judgment, without order, just a stream. Tasks, meetings, phrases, ideas, worries, desires, unfinished messages, small things you can't forget, everything, to paper, not the mind. And the more regularly you do it, the stronger a new neural habit forms, to let go before sleep, just like the body releases through relaxation, just like the breath slows down. The mind also needs a place to set things down. Mental load is the silent cause of chronic fatigue, because even in sleep, the brain holds the to-do list, and if that list is never downloaded, you live in constant anxiety. Masters productivity. Mental load dump is an act of trust in yourself, in tomorrow, in the belief that everything will continue, but not now, because now is night, and night has a purpose. Through this act of release, you restore sleep to its true meaning. Not a break, but a space for nervous system recovery. It's also a way of acknowledging you don't have to hold everything in your head. The brain is not a warehouse. It's not built for storage, it's a processor, and like any processor, it overheats when forced to store, analyze, and control all at once. You're not meant to remember everything, you're meant to offload. That's not weakness, that's mental hygiene. And when you've done it, the body relaxes differently. Breath softens, pulse evens out, even dreams become clearer. Because there are no more screaming files trying to burst from the deep, and over time, this act stops being a technique, it becomes a part of self-awareness, like evening hygiene, not just of the body, but of thoughts, because thinking also gathers dust, and it needs rinsing, without fear, without shame, without editing, just let the excess out. We so rarely allow ourselves to say, enough thinking. Not because everything is resolved, but because thinking isn't always what's needed. Sometimes, what's needed is a pause. Mental load dump is a pause with respect, a gesture that tells the brain, I hear you, I've written it down, now it's your turn to sleep. Then when the brain believes it doesn't have to hold anymore, it lets go, and only then do you truly sleep. Not hide, not wrestle, but disappear into the dark with relief, and in the morning, you wake up a person again, not a processor, with space for new thoughts, with clarity, with the feeling that the night truly helped, because when the mental load is released, you finally feel something simple forgotten, but so essential you exist, and that is enough.
There is a feeling. It doesn't roar, it doesn't demand, it whispers. It begins as a question, a flicker, a what's that, or how does this work, or what if, and in that whisper, the brain leans forward, something ancient stirs. It's not obligation, it's not achievement, it's not survival, it's curiosity, and in the most unexpected of ways, this soft mental motion does what few other forces can. It activates the brain's reward system. That's right, curiosity, real, genuine, self-initiated exploration, triggers the same internal circuitry as food, sex, and social connection. Not metaphorically, biologically. You get a dopamine pulse, not when you finish learning, but when you start wanting to know. That moment of wonder, that mental itch. It is not a distraction, it is a reward pathway ignition. And this is the core of the practice we call Curiosity Hour, a space you carve each day to follow your wonder, to learn what you actually want to learn, to engage in mental play without expectation, performance, or productivity metrics. It can last 30 minutes, or 60. It doesn't matter. To what matters is the mode. You follow interest, not obligation. And in doing so, you turn your brain from a tool of execution into a field of activation. Let's look at why this works. The neurochemistry of curiosity. When you're curious, the brain lights up, literally. Research from UC Davis, Gruber et al., 2014 shows that when people engage with information they're curious about, the ventral tegmental area, VTA, a dopamine-rich part of the brain, activates the nucleus accumbens lights up, the same region involved in anticipating rewards. The hippocampus, critical for memory formation, shows increased activity. The default mode network, responsible for daydreaming and integration, synchronizes with the executive network, which governs planning and attention. In short, curiosity binds emotion, memory, and motivation. It makes learning feel good, and it makes remembered information stick longer. This means that reading or exploring, out of pure interest, isn't a break from important work. It is the work, because the more you stimulate curiosity, the more flexible, adaptive, and focused your brain becomes. Why curiosity is medicine for modern minds. We live in a time of saturation, information overload, attention scarcity. Our minds are pulled toward urgency, not wonder, toward dopamine from scrolling, not discovering, toward the passive consumption of stimulation, not the active pursuit of meaning. Curiosity cuts through that. Because it is voluntary, driven from within, playful, detached from pressure, engaged, it builds flow. Expansive, it creates connections across domains. Restorative, it brings joy without dependency. In a brain overrun by cortisol, curiosity is a neurochemical breath of air. It reduces stress hormones, increases prefrontal cortex activation, and builds neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to rewire and grow. And unlike passive entertainment, curiosity makes you an active participant in your cognitive evolution. How to build a curiosity hour. You don't need a curriculum. You need permission. Permission to wonder, to follow tangents, to learn what lights you up, not what's expected. That's why Curiosity Hour begins with a simple ritual. Step 1. Enter the mind of a child. Remember what fascinated you before it was monetized or graded. Dinosaurs, space, psychology, magic, fractals, mythology. Step 2. Ask one genuine question. How do whales sleep? What's the science behind déjà vu? What was the real Stoic view on emotion? How did the Silk Road affect language? What happens in the brain during déjà vu? Step 3. Begin with a 20-60 minutes block. Read, watch, listen, take notes if it helps, but don't pressure retention. Trust the dopamine. Step 4. Let tangents be teachers. Don't fear off-topic branches. They are the roots of depth. A question about stars may lead to quantum physics. A documentary on bees might take you to swarm intelligence in AI. Step 5. End with reflection. What did I just learn? How did it make me feel? What new question did it give me? This closing seals the memory loop and reinforces emotional connection to learning. The identity shift. Something strange happens when you begin practicing Curiosity Hour regularly. You stop seeing yourself as someone who has to learn. You become someone who lives to explore. This shift affects your confidence because you feel resourceful, your emotional tone because curiosity displaces worry, your social depth because you bring more nuance to conversation, your focus capacity because attention improves when it's intrinsically motivated. This is not theoretical. It is identity through behavior. When you follow curiosity consistently, you start to believe, I'm someone who always figures things out. I'm someone whose brain loves to learn. I'm someone who gets excited by the unknown. And that belief is fuel, not hype, not pressure,
but sustainable intellectual joy. What to explore during Curiosity Hour? Anything that brings you genuine interest, no matter how niche. Here are examples that have helped thousands reclaim their mental energy. The physics of time dilation. How languages evolve without central control. Emotional mapping in film scores. Why jellyfish don't die. History of ancient cities. Architecture of ant colonies. Why bread rises. How scent links to memory. The life of Nikola Tesla. Chaos theory in weather systems. The psychology of dreams, neuroplasticity and learning. The mathematics of music. AI versus human creativity. Philosophy of free will. Your curiosity is not random. It is coded guidance to your deepest self. Every time you follow it, you strengthen that signal. Why the brain loves curiosity evolutionarily. Curiosity kept us alive. It told us, explore that new cave, taste that berry, but carefully. Notice that pattern in the sky. Why did that animal behave differently? It was our cognitive radar. And today, though the jungle has become digital, the radar still works. It's not just a luxury. It's a core survival mechanism. The more you train it, the faster you learn, the deeper you remember, the stronger your cognition becomes under pressure. In fact, many studies show that curiosity increases memory retention, even for unrelated material learned at the same time. That means when you learn something you want, you remember everything better. Curiosity rewires the entire learning system. Curiosity as a healing practice. Let's go deeper. Curiosity isn't just fun. It is antidote to anxiety. Because fear is fixated on the known danger, curiosity is open to new information. You can't be fully curious and fully afraid at the same time. The limbic system emotion and prefrontal cortex cognition begin to resynchronize during active curiosity. It softens rumination. It expands perspective. It reduces threat bias. In trauma therapy, clinicians often help clients rebuild curiosity as a sign that the nervous system is ready to engage with life again. That's how profound curiosity is. It isn't entertainment. It's reconnection. Final thought, the world doesn't need more discipline. It needs more wonder. And you don't need to be an expert. You need to be alive to questions. Let 1 hour a day, or even 30 minutes, be for that. Let yourself roam. Let your neurons light up like constellations. And remember, the brain was not built to execute commands. It was built to seek, sense, ask, imagine, play. That is your original self, and it's one page, one video, one question away. Curiosity is not a break from progress. It is the pulse of possibility, and it's yours, every day, every hour. If you simply follow it,